And could she be the person the job called for? At points, she questioned, what am I really doing here? Am I adequate? And I'm sure she even felt afraid. Can you imagine that emotional cocktail that accompanies a CEO who wasn't yet quite sure who she was supposed to be? It is in moments like these that the community becomes the savior and the protector. Her family, the constant rock in her life, came to her rescue through her sister Pat, who suggested that she go back to school and gain the competencies she needed to stop talking this nonsense about quitting. The recommendation was not greeted with great thanks, nor was it greeted with enthusiasm. But the pains of her reality were greater than her ego, and she yielded over time. It was this decision that became the inflection point at which the chain reaction of transformation began. Maxine's sister Pat led her to the Center for Creative Leadership, and through that program and new relationships, she realized she was not alone in her struggles. And even more importantly, she amassed a set of tools to help her be better and do better. Maxine continued on her journey, and she reflected to see that it was not sensible for persons to wait until they felt her pains or they got a promotion into a new position to become better leaders. They could lead from where they are. And this led to the first leadership-focused retreat at the Management Institute for National Development for all staff, which was themed Be Your Own CEO. And I'm sure the MIND staff members who are part of that can recall that experience. She also commenced a Leadership Essential course for all MIND employees, first led by the Center for Creative Leadership facilitators, then with Maxine as co-facilitator. And today, the program still continues, but with in-house developed facilitation, led mainly by your moderator today, Georgia. There are many other firsts in this story, ladies and gentlemen. Mind's first strategic retreat with an emphasis on leadership, the first rebranding of our conferences to a leadership focus, the conceptualization of a public sector leadership development center established on a framework based on research and study tours to places such as Canada and India. The Leadership Conference Center is in effect today and doing impactful work. Maxine still was not pleased, not satisfied, and continued to grow. She went on to do her doctoral studies, which focused on, you can guess, leadership. Thereafter, year-in, annually, she would attend an annual International Leadership Association conference. And the same passion she has today for leadership was observed at one of those particular conferences where participants suggested that she consider a program at Naropa University on authentic leadership. And it was there in April 2017 that she met Dr. Suzanne Skjei, your presenter at our leadership webinar today. The value Susan brings to mind and the wider public service has been great. And thus the connection has continued for almost 5 years now, I believe. And the rest, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, is history, which we are making. So ladies and gentlemen, this is how we got here. Maxine's journey to Dr. Ruby Brown, and with the support of the village, of course, caused us to be here together, continuing to make history. Now, if you recall, the story's title is Maxine the Great, an Authentic Leader. You will also realize that I have not yet closed the loop. We now know of Maxine's journey, an awesome journey She's about 5 feet, 1 inch tall, pretty short, but very impactful. But the question is, what makes her an authentic leader? In a particular contribution by Kevin Cruz in 2013 to the online Forbes magazine, he shared that there are really for him 4 traits of an authentic leader: genuine, not perfect, mission driven, and focused on results, lead with the heart, not to be confused with being soft, and focused on long-term results. This is the executive summary of Dr. Ruby Maxine Brown. In essence, ladies and gentlemen, I took the time to share with you a story, not of bravado or aggrandizement, but to share that the process of growth is not pretty. It's not easy, it's not fast, but it is necessary. And for those who stay on the path, the rewards are immeasurable. Just knowing that this leadership webinar is so well supported speaks volumes, not only of Dr. Brown and the sacrifices made, or about Mind as an institution for leadership development, but it says volumes about you. It says volumes about you individually and your ability to reflect and respond to the call of greatness and growth. You are here for a reason. It's not coincidental that you registered for this particular webinar. I therefore encourage you to continue on the path and find your own Sister Pat support group to ensure you stay on course. Thank you again for coming. Stay tuned, pause all the distractions, learn all you can. Once again, thank you on behalf of Dr. Ruby Brown.
Very much for that, Prudence. You have certainly now set the tone as we sit eagerly awaiting what is yet to come as it relates to authentic leadership, why it matters. Colleagues, it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Susan Skjei. Susan Skjei has worked with thousands of leaders in the US, Canada, Europe, and Jamaica to cultivate mindfulness and authenticity, strengthen relational, coaching, and strategic skills, and effectively lead the changes they want to see in their organizations and in the world. She has a unique ability to create energetic and high-trust learning environments that accelerate the achievement of practical organizational results while building strong collaborative relationships. Formerly a vice president and chief learning officer in the technology sector and an international consultant, she was also the founder and director of the Authentic Leadership Center at Naropa University. Susan has a PhD from Fielding Graduate University in Human and Organization Systems and a certificate in Change Management from Cornell University. She enjoys hiking, biking, and watercolor painting. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome our presenter for this topic, Authentic Leadership, Why It Matters, Dr. Susan Skjei.
Thank you so much, Georgia. And thank you, Prudence, for that wonderful story about Ruby Brown. I have been so happy to have met her earlier in her leadership career and to have enjoyed several different opportunities to teach in the Jamaican government system with Mind, and am currently involved in a program with Mind on coaching. And I've also been teaching in a leadership program that they host. So it's just been lovely and very informative and interesting to collaborate with Dr. Brown. And so happy to be working now with Georgia, who is just a wonderful collaborator and so well informed about leadership development. So I would love to get to know each of you personally. I know that's challenging to do with so many people online. But one thing I'd like to invite you to do is take a moment and let's gather ourselves together. First, individually, I invite you to just notice, how are you feeling today? How are you coming into this workshop? This is the essence of authenticity, is knowing ourselves and being able to connect our body, our emotions, and our thoughts, to synchronize them. So let's do that together. I'll just invite you to notice your feet on the floor, your seat in the chair. Sometimes we need to shake out our shoulders a little bit just to be relaxed and present. And so this is, first of all, just connecting to our body. And then, how are you feeling? Notice your heart. How am I coming into this workshop today? Am I feeling excited, a little bit afraid, maybe some anticipation? Or am I preoccupied with other things that took place before, or am I anticipating what might happen in the future? So let's take all of those thoughts and just put them aside. And I invite you each to take 3 deep breaths before we begin. So you can do that on your own. Thank you. Just giving ourselves an opportunity to be present. Good. Okay, now if you would, in the chat, just in 1 or 2 or 3 words, how are you today? How are you coming into this workshop? Whatever you say is fine. We're just practicing authenticity. Okay, Divya, I like your comment. I'm feeling a little tired, but very much eager to learn. Right, good, good. So again, we're starting to practice the very first skill of authentic leadership, which is presence. Being present. All right, good. Now I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started on our content. We have a few learning objectives for today. First of all, understanding the importance of fostering authenticity. Why does that matter? We're going to really lean into that. And trust and engagement is so important in the workplace. We'll explore how to effectively enact the changes you want to see in your organization, and also gain some techniques and approaches that will help you in your interpersonal interactions, your self-awareness, and your creativity. And this is a picture of a classroom in mind where I was a few years ago with people that were studying in a program that I was teaching. Now everything's online. So I haven't been able to come to Jamaica. I'm so sad about that, but maybe in the future. Today, we're going to, first of all, start with some context. So we're living in a very tumultuous and changing world, and we'll see how that impacts our leadership abilities. We'll look at authentic leadership. I'll give you some definitions, and there are many different people who've explored authentic leadership over the years, and I'll share with you some of those models. Then we'll talk about the benefits of authentic leadership, both for you and for your organization. And we'll dive into what are the skills that are necessary for being an authentic leader, and we'll begin to cultivate some of those together through a journaling process. It might be helpful if you have with you just a piece of paper and a pen, or if you'd like to just take notes on your computer, that's fine too, but we'll be doing a little bit of journaling later on in our program. And then finally, how can I create a culture of authenticity in my workplace? Okay, let's dive in. So we live in a changing world. Again, I'd love to invite you to put in the chat, what are some of the things that you see are changing? Now, we've all just been through a massive change, which was a result of COVID. And that impacted all of us in just so many profound and difficult and challenging ways. Some good things came out of it. And I would say one of those is our ability to learn online. You know, that really was accelerated through this whole process. But I was just about to get on an airplane to come to Jamaica to help teach a leadership program when the entire country shut down. And I believe that must have been in about March 2020. And I was so disappointed not to be able to come and see your beautiful country yet again. But again, we were able to transition to an online program and all went well. So let me just check now into the chat and see what you're saying. So, or maybe Georgia, I'm not sure if you can read any of the things. So let's add a few things about what is changing in your world. We live in what many people are now calling a VUCA world, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But it's a term that many people are using now to describe kind of the chaos that we're envisioning and that we're experiencing. And it's a result of being so interconnected. So let's explore what VUCA means. So V means volatility. Here we have an example of just weather patterns, which I'm sure you're all too familiar with. But it's, again, just a metaphor for the kind of chaotic environment that we find ourselves in as leaders, whether we work in the public sector or whether we work in for-profit or nonprofit organizations. There's a lot of uncertainty that's a result of all that volatility. We're not sure. I mean, just because of COVID, we saw so many results. One was, that still continues on, is just the uncertainty of the workforce. Are people in? Are they out? How is it working? There's also a lot of complexity now, and I would imagine this is particularly true in Jamaica, that being your own economy and yet being so connected to everyone else in the world, you are sometimes, having to react rather than respond to situations you find yourselves in. And then finally, that creates so much ambiguity. Who are we? What are we about nowadays? And for leaders, this can be very, very difficult. We may feel like we're just exactly like this little hamster having to go faster and faster and faster in order to keep up with everything. And all of this is to set the stage for why authenticity is so important. Because if we allow ourselves to be constantly distracted by all of the changes that are taking place in the world, we lose our center, we lose our confidence, we lose our ability to be our own person. So what can we do? Well, I recommend, instead of focusing so much on our external realities of VUCA, we can shift the focus to developing our own internal resilience. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in this program. And that is one of the things that Dr. Brown discovered with authentic leadership, is that she could anchor herself in her own confidence that's unconditional, that's based on internal values, understanding of what's going on rather than reacting to your own fears about what's going on. building strong connections with other people, and continuing to increase authenticity. All right, many of you may have seen this before, but I just love this quote from Viktor Frankl, who is such a powerful leader and influencer. He was a Holocaust survivor and really showed the world through his book, Man's Search for Meaning, the importance of being able to be confident and to be resilient in the face of terrible circumstances. And so this quote, between a stimulus and a response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And the last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Think how powerful that is. I mean, another example of this is Nelson Mandela, who was in jail for so many years and yet maintained the vision and the resilience that was needed to come back out when he was released from jail and to become such a strong leader. I mean, these are people that can show us the real inspiration of authenticity and of understanding who we are at a very deep level. So here's a picture of your brain. These are our neurons, and our brain is really important when it comes to authentic leadership, because when we are reacting, our brain freezes up and we go into a fight, flight, or freeze response. That's the stress response. But when we can train ourselves to be resilient and responsive, we can have a very different effect. So when we react, we're playing not to lose. And you might have been watching the World Cup soccer series and noticing some of the really wonderful players that are out on the field. You know, when they're playing not to lose, and I imagine that a lot of them do get into this mindset, they aren't playing quite as well. There's a fear of loss, there's some desperation, and their self-esteem is rooted in their appearance and comparison to others. It's a kind of mindset of just survival. But when we can be in a responsive mindset, we're playing to create or contribute. And amazing things can happen when we are in this state of mind. We have a feeling of abundance, gratitude, and our self-esteem is rooted in our capability to learn and in our long-term success. And so that's the definition of thriving. When we think about today's workforce, and this is not just in the United States, but worldwide, there's a real issue about engagement. And again, I would say that this might be one of the results of COVID, is that people have kind of disconnected. There's a sense of maybe loss of heart and lack of engagement. So I did a little research, and especially on the Gallup website, they are the ones who do so many surveys that are international. And they define employee engagement as the involvement and enthusiasm of employees in their work and their workplace. And the way your organization treats employees and how they treat one another can positively affect their actions, or, and here's the big point, they can place your organization at risk. But unfortunately, only 15% of employees worldwide and perhaps 35% in the US fall in the engaged category. And here's the really, really important point for all of us as leaders, is that one of the biggest discoveries is that the manager or the team leader accounts for 70% of the variance in team engagement. That is really a big number, and just shows us that as leaders, everything we do matters. So how do we create trust and engagement in the workforce? That is why we're talking about authentic leadership today. So what is it? Well, Bill George, who did quite an extensive research study by interviewing people about their life stories and finding out that those leaders who had faced difficulty and challenges and were able to overcome them had become more authentic. So authentic leadership doesn't mean that you have a perfect life. It means you have looked at your life, you've recognized your challenges, and you've overcome them. And we're going to talk about how that happens in a little bit. And then Bruce Avolio, who's another wonderful leadership development specialist, says that authentic leaders are confident, hopeful, optimistic, resilient, and they rate high on moral character. In other words, authentic leadership is about being yourself and doing the right thing. Sounds easy, right? Let's look at some of the benefits before we get into the competencies, because I really want you to see authentic leadership as a very, very practical and useful way to lead. It's challenging because it requires you to know yourself. But let's get into the benefits. So one is engagement. As we mentioned, that it's a key to team members' hearts and minds. Authentic leadership results in higher levels of employee engagement and satisfaction. Transparency. When you're transparent as a leader, your people will also be more transparent than they would with someone who's inauthentic. You know, let's just think back to people that we've worked for, that we really respected and appreciated. How were they? Were they authentic? Did you have a feeling that they were playing a role, that they were just, trying to look good? So because of an authentic leader's empathy, people are more willing to be empowered and to display their authentic self. And finally, trust. Trust is such an important part of the workplace. When we don't feel trust, everything takes forever, right? Because we need to put more rules and more regulations in place because we don't trust. And so authenticity can inspire dedication and, again, engagement. When persons can be themselves at work, your team will be dedicated and will enthusiastically follow your lead. And when they feel they can trust you, their leader, and that you are genuine, they're more likely to be engaged and motivated to do their best work. So, okay, that's the promise of authentic leadership. Now, let's get into it a little bit more. I want to know from you, who are the leaders you most admire? I have some pictures of some of the leaders I admire, but give yourselves a moment to really think about who are these people, because we're going to be going into some small groups and you'll have an opportunity to check in with 2 other people. And what I'd like you to do is to come back with telling me what are some of the characteristics of these leaders you most admire. So here are some of mine. Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, who we heard about earlier today from Prudence, and then, of course, Bob Marley. So I'd like to now invite you to go into some breakout rooms, and you'll need to accept the invitation to go into those rooms. I'll stop sharing here for a moment. And thank you for your comments that you put into the chat. I appreciate hearing about how you're seeing your world. Georgia.
Yeah, and Susan, as persons are about to go into rooms, I just want to remind everyone to please ensure that you're logged on with your full name. It just requires you to go down to the bottom of the screen, click participants, hover over your name. You will see 3 dots comes up. It says more, and it gives you the option to rename. It's important for us to have your full name when we capture you on our register. Okay, so get ready to accept the invitation to join the breakout rooms.
And we'll just be in the rooms for about 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
Yeah, is that workable? And give each person an opportunity to speak, and then you can together try to make a list of some of the characteristics. All right, have fun in your groups.
Lloyd, you're asking how to get into your group. You should see a message on your screen asking to join group. If not, go to the bottom of your screen. You should see more, click more, and then you will see join breakout room. Susan, I'm going into a particular room that's asking for help, okay?
That's fine, Georgia. Thank you.
Mr. Wilkes, you're not seeing the invitation to join your room? You're muted. I'm not hearing you.
No, I'm not. I'm not seeing it.
Okay, did you go to the bottom of the screen where you have the options? Share.
We have the 3 dots.
Yes.
So I've gone to that option. And I see chat, meeting settings, disconnect audio, raise hand, and some emojis. There are 3 additional dots on those emojis. So I've clicked on those 3 dots, and I have some further emojis come up, but I'm not seeing anything requiring me to join a group.
Let me look for your name. All right, did you see anything come up a while ago?
Okay, yes, join breakout room.
All right.
So
Just click.
Suzanne, just check the chat, please.
Thank you. I see that.
Susan, I'm going to close the rooms now. It's 10 minutes.
Okay.
Um,
Meeting is being recorded.
Okay.
Hello?
Welcome back, everyone. So I hope you had some interesting conversations in your breakout groups. I would love to hear from you. What are some of the characteristics of the leaders that you admire? And it would be great if somebody wanted to say them out loud, or if you want to put them in the chat, that would be fine as well. So Demisha, I see your hand up.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So on behalf of the group, they also admired Nelson Mandela, Marley, and we had thrown in Michael Manley. So I don't know if you are, if you know who that is or who that was. But
Say more.
Right. So what was discussed was that for Nelson Mandela, he had a purpose. And, he had that vision, he was driven, and so he remained focused and dedicated and allowed nothing to derail him from accomplishing his purpose. And he was very passionate about it as well. And so when it came on to people, he always addressed their needs and he empowered people. He really cared for people. And so we said that he is or was a charismatic leader.
Yes.
Quickly from Michael, he had demonstrated similar characteristics. So he was a charismatic leader. He was also for the people. When he spoke, people were very in tune, and he was very he was very instrumental in some of the labor laws that were changed in Jamaica for the advancement, the benefits for people, or for people to benefit from it. Sorry. When it came on to the final one, Bob Marley, he spoke about unity. They were all really champions for change through motivational speeches and music. And of course, Bob was also a charismatic man, so that's what we discussed in our group. Thank you.
Lovely. Wow, what a great list. So I got purpose, passion, charisma, and unity, among other things. Thank you so much, Demisha. Colleen, I see your hand up. Can you? Yeah, great.
Right. For my group, we did also select 3 of the leaders you admired: Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, and Gandhi.
Okay.
And Tony Dungy was added, who is a football coach. And the qualities or the characteristics that we admired in these leaders, and that we admire in leaders in general, is that they have courage, they show empathy, they are passionate, they are selfless, forgiving, They're also committed to the cause. They look at the greater good and sustainability rather than their own satisfying their own needs or desire. And they stay true to the course, ensuring that they benefit whatever it is that they are championing or leading that cause. So those were some of what we discussed in our group.
Thank you. I love the addition of empathy. I think that's just so important.
Susan, we have some in the chat.
Oh,
We have
yes.
some participants who are physically here.
Okay.
And they indicated Martin Luther King, Mandela, Brenda Walker, Moses the Hebrew, and some of the traits: caring, empowering, transformation, fearless, resilience, empathetic, and authentic.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Georgia. Okay, we're just going to take a couple more of these because I want to give you an opportunity to practice some of these skills. So let's hear from Bev. Bev Edwards.
Good morning, everyone. So breakout room 14, we had leaders who we admired, the group Michael Manley, Mayor Motley of Barbados, Fidel Castro, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa. And what we realized with all of these leaders, it was service above self.
Ah, nice. Great way to summarize.
They were empathy oriented, love for people, charismatic, and they were very passionate. And authentic leadership require all of that and more, maybe.
Yeah, yes, perhaps more. Thank you. Thank you, Bev. I see in the chat someone is talking about Barack Obama. Thank you. And we see some additional names. By the way, if you want to save the chat, you can click on the 3 dots down there at the bottom of the chat, and you can save it in case you want to keep these names. All right. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your comments and those of you who also spoke out. So we're going to move on now because I want to give you an opportunity to learn more about authentic leadership and to practice some of the skills. So let's go back to our slideshow. All right, so some of the characteristics of authentic leaders, and many of these are things that you mentioned, but I'm going to try to, some of the language is a little different, so I want to put it in context. So this is based on academic research where people who were identified as authentic leaders by others were interviewed. And the attempt was made to try to distill down what are the characteristics. I'm going to show you 2 different models. This is the one that's kind of what's at the core of being an authentic leader. And then we're going to see Bill George's model, which is one that shows what are some of the practices of authentic leadership. So no surprise, authenticity is made up of 1, self-awareness, which I mentioned before, but it's so important. And how do we cultivate self-awareness? Well, first of all, what are the different aspects of being a human being that we could be aware of? Well, one is our body. And we did that little practice at the beginning to tune into how are we feeling and sensing and embodying our presence right now, right here. Next is emotions. How are we feeling? And this has a lot to do with emotional intelligence, knowing, first of all, how we are, and then secondly, being able to see how other people are doing and relate with them from a place of genuineness. And then thirdly, our mental capacities. How are we thinking today? Sometimes we find ourselves getting into habitual thought patterns and loops. And so using processes like a mindfulness meditation technique or yoga or some other things that can help us step away from our habits can be very, very good disciplines in practicing self-awareness. Number two, relational transparency. How are we with other people? These were some comments you made about the leaders you really admire, that they were able to engage with others and inspire them and give talks and speeches that were motivating and to really help others feel what's possible in our lives together. Number three, internalized moral perspective. I think this has a lot to do with having a sense of purpose that's larger than ourselves, and where we don't just let the mean or the ends justify the means, but where we do things out of a sense of moral perspective or justice. And many of the leaders that you mentioned are just these kind of people. And then finally, what does balanced processing look like, sound like? That's a term that might not be familiar. But again, that's the ability to stay balanced even when you're feeling stressed, even when difficult circumstances are happening, that you have the ability to remain resilient. So this was a study done by Michael Kernes, which became kind of the basis of an assessment tool that you can find online for authentic leadership. And it really measures these 4 different aspects of leadership. And it might be something fun for you to take that test yourself, or something that you might want to do with your team. All right, now this is really important. What gets in the way of authenticity? Again, if you'd like to put some of your ideas in the chat, that would be very good. But I'm going to share a few that seem particularly important based on my experience and also research. So the first one is the voice of judgment inside of our own heads, but it can also be the voice of judgment of other people that is intimidating to us. And so to be authentic means to be anchored in our own sense of confidence and values, so that when judgments come up, we know ourselves well enough that we don't have to fall into trying to please others all of the time. But the voice of judgment is the blockage to having an open mind. And we all have judgments, that's okay. But when we let them get in the way of our ability to know how we actually think and feel right this minute, that becomes a problem. Number 2, the voice of cynicism. This relates to emotions. Have you ever come across someone who just seems disconnected, disengaged, and nothing is right? And everything that happens in the world, they have a cynical attitude of, oh, that person doesn't know what they're talking about, or that can't be true. And maybe we might say, well, that's a negative attitude, but it's based on a kind of emotional frozenness, where that person is not able to really engage in a genuine way with others. And therefore, their relationships are limited. And so cynicism is important to recognize, not as this is reality, but to recognize it as it's actually a bit of a problem when you have this voice of cynicism going on in your head, or in your heart, really, is where that one lives. And then finally, the voice of fear. Wow, this is a big one. We might be afraid of taking risks or stepping out of our comfort zone. We might be afraid of what other people will think. We might be afraid of going against the status quo. But when we think about all of the leaders that we admire, somehow they were able to move beyond their fear and to actually embrace their purpose in a way that was powerful. And lastly, I'm going to say the voice of shame. Now, what is shame? Shame is where maybe you make a mistake about something, or you do something that you don't feel good about. But rather than thinking, oh, okay, I feel bad about that, and now I need to forgive myself and move on, and yes, I won't do it again. I admit I did something wrong, but I can change that. Now, shame is where you think, I can't fix myself. I am the problem. I'm the one who should be, I'm actually the one who created all of this, and therefore I can't do anything differently. So shame is requires a lot of self-love and a lot of forgiveness. So no matter what you did or what someone else did, there is a way out of that shame dungeon, and that is through talking it out and through again, practicing some of these things that I've mentioned before, such as mindfulness, to help you find that self-care and self-love. All right, so now let's look at some of the practices of authentic leadership as developed by Bill George. And these should look familiar to you as well. Purpose and passion, oh my goodness, that is so important. The leaders you mentioned knew what they were doing, and they were doing it for others. They also understood the second one, their values, and their behaviors reflected that. I think of Barack Obama as one example of a person who had to speak about the difficulties of race relationships in the United States. And of course, he was blamed for making it sound like he was the one who was creating the problem. No, he was talking about the problem and trying to make it be something that everyone could work with and relate with. So he held to his values, and he didn't allow others to make him not speak. He was willing to speak out. Relationships and a feeling of connectedness. This is so important. As leaders, we need to be the ones who reach out to others. One of the programs I also teach is called The Right Use of Power. And everyone has responsibility, 100% responsibility for the relationships. But leaders should take 150% responsibility for the relationships, because we are in a higher power position than the people that are working for us. And so we need to be more responsible. And this leads to the second one, the next one, which is self-discipline. And Bill George defines this as consistency, but it's not that you're always the same every time, but it's that you're consistently committed to being genuine, to being authentic. And you don't fall into faking it or fall into just pretending. And then finally, heart and compassion. All of you mentioned this as well, and it came out in the term empathy. And I think that charisma actually has something to do with this as well, because when we really care about other people, it shows. It comes through in the ways that we engage with them. All right, so I want to now invite you to just have a little taste of your own authenticity, and with just a little exercise. So when we're, this little chart just is a way of showing that our character, which is kind of the core of who we are, can be covered over by our persona, which is maybe our personality and how we want to appear to others. Now, sometimes we have to put on our persona. For example, today I put on my coat and I fixed my hair and I put on my glasses so I could see you. And we have to do some things in order to just be in the world and be connected. But if we think, oh, I am my persona, then that becomes a problem. So what is character? Character is the kind of how we are when we're really ourselves, when we're deeply and intensively active and alive. And I love this quote because it's just inspiring, that moment when there's a voice inside that says, this is the real me. And we've all had those moments in our lives. And yet sometimes we don't bring them into the workplace. Sometimes we might feel like, well, I can't show my real self. Well, it's true. You might have to be discerning about how and when you bring yourself into the workplace. But let's have a little taste of that. So remember a time when you felt most deeply and intensively active, alive, and real. What did that feel like? And what were you thinking? So please feel free to put some things in the chat if you would like to. So what was that like for you? I just want you to have a taste. You know, I'm remembering a time when our family went on a vacation to Death Valley. Sounds scary, right? It's one of the hottest places in the world, but we were there in the fall. It wasn't too hot. But I climbed up on top of a peak. And some of my family members were afraid to go up there. But I went up there and I had this beautiful view of the whole expanse of this desert. And it was so enlivening and exciting. And I thought, boy, I feel like I'm really me right now. I'm in touch with being confident. I feel brave. I feel courageous. And I'm also in awe of nature. So that combination of things really, really meant a lot. Okay, Georgia, are you seeing anything in the chat?
Yes, in the chat, Suzanne Gale is saying absolute freedom and happiness.
Ah, beautiful. Yes, yes. Okay, well, let's move on. Well, this is another great quote. I think I'll just read it out because it's so good. George Bernard Shaw, this is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose, recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being thoroughly worn out before you're thrown on the trash heap, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. Oh, yes. Well, so when we're in touch with our purpose, we feel that way.
There are some other comments in chat.
Yes, please.
Liberty. Another Justine says, I feel more alive when I volunteer and see the changes it brings. Zreen says, free, endless possibilities. Vanessa has trusting persons around. And Faylene has never really thought of it. And now I am thinking about it and I can't seem to identify that one moment. So keep thinking, Faylene. And Aldine says, being fully relaxed and at peace with myself.
Yes.
Pauline has, when I went ziplining, felt out of persona and into character.
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, one of the most difficult things as leaders is when we feel like we're faking it. And there's been a lot of research done on this when we're kind of pretending. And it becomes, very stressful to feel like I can't really be myself. And so you need to be friends with yourself first and foremost. And then beyond that, to become friends with others and to be able to show a little bit more of yourself each time. So what I'd like to invite you into now is we're going to do some journaling. So if you'd like to get yourself ready with a piece of paper or with on your computer, to just have a place where you can take a few notes. We're going to go through each of these 5 competencies, and I'm going to invite you into more self-awareness, right? That's the first thing that we need to do as authentic leaders, is to begin asking ourselves some of these exciting and challenging questions so that we can know ourselves better. Okay. So, purpose and passion. Maybe before we start writing, I want to talk a little bit about how to journal in this moment. And that is, I suggest something called automatic writing, which is you put your pen to paper or you start typing on your computer And you just type whatever comes to mind. Don't edit. We're practicing stepping beyond being judgmental and cynical, and instead just letting yourself get to know yourself in a new way. So we're just going to take a few minutes for each of these 5 competencies that Bill George had identified. And so we'll start with purpose and passion, which you said many of your leaders have. So what inspires and motivates me? Go ahead and just start jotting down a few notes. Now, if you don't have a pen and paper, you can just do this in your own mind, and later you can take some notes if you like. What inspires and motivates me? Maybe you just put down a couple of things like, someone mentioned volunteering. You may feel a strong spiritual connection, and that inspires and motivates you. Maybe you just love jumping in there and being creative at work. Okay, what is meaningful to me? Again, a deep question. Maybe it's family. Maybe it's your significant other. Who knows? Up to you. All right, what gives me energy? This is a really important one. You can tell when someone invites you to do something and you feel a loss of energy. That's a good thing to tell you. Maybe that doesn't fit my purpose. And finally, what does the world need from me? Of course, we don't want to do everything because the world needs it, but it's helpful to be relevant, isn't it? That gives us a sense of purpose. Yeah, again, if you want to put things in the chat, that's fine. It's wonderful to hear from you.
We're having some comments.
Okay.
Alderine says, learning new things, gaining new experiences, and meeting deadlines.
Okay,
Sharon
good.
has making a difference in somebody's life that is inspirational and purposeful.
Right.
Leah says, my family learning adventures and being selfless.
Oh, good.
Audrey has volunteering motivates me. Vivia says exercising. Audrey has when a conversation or my work transforms lives. Vivia has love. Diana has gardening, helping, giving advice. Sharonette, love, selflessness. And Raymond has the feeling of helping others.
Oh, thank you for reading them out. It's so beautiful to hear these comments. And don't forget to keep track of them for yourself as well, because when we're off purpose, we lose our connection to our own authenticity. All right, moving along. Values. The values are the things that really matter to you, and they show up in your behavior. So here's a very provocative question. What do I spend time and money on? You might think, wow, I have very altruistic values, and yet I'm spending all my time and money doing something that's really not that. So this is a moment of hard truth. How do I spend my time? Okay, number 2, what do I stand for? Many of the leaders you mentioned, they took a stand for social justice, or they took a stand for fairness. Maybe I take a stand for honesty or integrity, or maybe I just take a stand for creating a safe environment where people can be themselves. Another question about values. What am I willing to sacrifice for? Yeah, I think we need to mute. Someone needs to mute, please. Okay, good. What am I willing to sacrifice for? And then how does my behavior reflect what I value? So these are really good provocative questions for being honest with ourselves about what, it's almost asking that question, what really matters, yet again. And by the way, if you're having a good time journaling, you're doing your automatic writing, just ignore everything I'm saying. You've got the questions here. And yes, is there anything in the chat that you would like to read?
Yes, there is. Diana has anything that adds value to my daily life, knowledge, food. Audrey has, I spend my time mentoring young people. Steve Simon says, okay, there's another one. I stand for integrity and making a positive difference. It's important, Diana has, it is important to be present for the ones that matter. And Crystal says, time on money, on social upliftment, I stand for impartiality.
Beautiful.
Diane also has sacrifice for family. There says respect, fairness, and human connection. Justine has, I spend my time being active. I stand for integrity and honesty and keeping it real. I will sacrifice my family. My behavior should be an example to others.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I like this call and response. Okay, number 3, relationships and connectedness. Okay, we already talked a little bit about who are some of the people that you admire, but you may have a longer list. Maybe it includes your own children or someone that we haven't mentioned yet, your grandparents. And who is it that you can actually be vulnerable with? These are such valuable relationships where you can kind of let down your hair and tell it like it is. And who are the persons that you can be courageous with? Maybe that's a different group. I don't know. People who inspire courage in you. And now, this is kind of the bottom line. How can I let go of my judgment, cynicism, fear, shame in my relationships with others? Those are the things that get in the way. And it may be that we need to become our own best friend. And so learning some different techniques and methods for doing that can be very, very helpful as a leader. These are things we don't often think about with leadership. We think about more like strategic planning or some of these more externally oriented things. But authentic leadership is how you are with yourself and how you are with others. It starts there, of course. All right, anything showing up in the chat?
Yes, I think some persons are admiring their family members. Justine says, I admire my father. And Nicole is saying here, I stand for integrity, truth, and respect. I love spending time on projects that positively affect others, others comfortable and making them happy, I suppose. All right, Debbie Ann is saying, my mother. Shernet is saying she admires her family. Justine says, I'm vulnerable and courageous with my family. Alderine is saying, my grandmother, my family. Michelle is also saying family, so that's shown up a lot. Faylene says, I admire my mother, can't be vulnerable with anyone, can be courageous with my children. And we have Tina saying, my family. Nikasha is saying, admire my grandmother. Admire my mother, that's Joanne. And Jocelyn say, I let go of judgment et al. By not judging others and being true to myself.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. Again, that's very inspiring. Now we're going to move on to the next 2 because I want to give you some time to talk about it in some small groups. So self-discipline, again, consistency is not just that I'm always the same, but it's that I am committed to being in relationship and being connected to my world. So, in what ways am I too rigid? Maybe I have too many ideas about what everybody else should be, and those are getting in my way. Or in what ways am I too unpredictable? Sometimes, in order to be free, we do things that maybe are hard for other people to deal with because they don't quite know where we're coming from. And then how can I make and keep commitments to those who are important to me? This is a deep question. I don't expect you to have all the answers to it right now, but it might be one that inspires you to think more deeply. Okay, I'm ready to hear anything that might be in the chat.
Not for this question.
Not for this one yet.
Right,
Yeah.
but this one says, Jodianne mentioned that in terms of person she admires, she says, my past supervisor, my work mom.
Nice.
Yes. Okay, there's one. Justine is saying, I keep my commitments by showing up and being present.
Good. That's right. All right, we'll move to the last one. So you can keep working on these, and I'll just share this last one with you. And that is about heart and compassion, which again, you also said was important. And, you know, a lot of times we don't talk about this in the workplace. We don't talk about love. We don't talk about care. But here are some questions that might be helpful for you as you think about this. It's not all love and light, right? Sometimes we are with people that we disagree with. So how can I be curious about those with whom I disagree? How can I empathize with people who are different from me? And how can I see the humanity in others and reach out with empathy? You know, these are all how questions, but they're really more, I guess, inspiring questions to say, this is what it takes. If you want to lead with heart and compassion, it means dealing with the people that are not so comfortable to be with and who we may perceive as being different and who we may even disagree with. That's the big challenge of authentic leadership. How can I be myself and still make room for others who may be different?
Susan, a participant is just asking if you can go back one slide.
Sure. I moved through that one rather quickly.
But just to let participants know as well that we'll be sending the recording and the slide presentation. So you can continue doing further journaling beyond the session today.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, so however far you've gotten with this today is a good start. And I'll go back to the last slide now, if I can. And we'll go back into some small groups. And, you know, I'm thinking, Georgia, that maybe maybe 12 minutes would be sufficient for this so that we still have time at the end for some Q&A and comments from people. Thank you. So do accept the invitation to join a breakout group just so you can have an opportunity to share your comments with others. And I look forward to hearing your comments when you return.
So Susan, they're sharing comments generally around what they have journaled.
Okay, so yes.
Clarity.
Yeah, so for clarity on the instructions, perhaps you could each take 1 minute to just share, what are you learning about yourself? What's one thing that you've learned about yourself from doing these journaling questions? You don't have to share everything about your life. You won't have enough time for that. So each person could just share a little bit, and then you could have a general conversation. and then we'll come back and harvest what you've been learning.
Okay, so participants, you may be in a different room this time because we have expanded the number of rooms, so the number of you will be less. So in most cases, 4 to 5 persons. So get ready to accept your invitation to join the room.
Oh, did we miss all of that being recorded?
No, it was recording.
Oh, good. Okay.
Stop, we need to stop recording now, though.
I think it's recording, so we might need to turn it off now.
Okay.
Put it in the chat. Or if you'd like to show up on the screen and talk, we would love to hear from you. So what is one thing you're learning about yourself as you consider all these different elements of what it means to be an authentic leader? Where do you see your self-awareness growing? Or where might be some possibilities for growth for you? Okay, let's all mute and go ahead and add some things to the chat if you would like to, or you can also raise your hand.
Asking persons to mute themselves, please.
Yes.
Trying to find. Susan, I think I muted you inadvertently.
Thank you. Okay. Good. All right. Who would like to share something about what you're discovering about yourself or about authentic leadership that you'd like to share? We'd love to hear from you. You can put it in the chat, or if you would raise your hand, it would be nice to hear from you as well. Okay, Feline.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. All right, so since we start this, and especially the last exercise, the practices of authentic leadership and that exercise that we went through, I do realize that I really don't know me as well as I thought. And I think I do not take time in the moment. So whatever it is that I'm doing, I don't really take time to see how it makes me feel, whatever it is that I'm doing, how it makes me feel. I just get in there and hurry up, get out of it. So I really probably need to spend more time there to see, okay, how does this situation make me feel now? And I really don't. So I am not, in terms of that compassion and empathy, I am not that type of person. Like I would have said in the chat, I am more rigid. I'm into fairness. I'm into justice. So no, you can't get me bending on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your honesty. I mean, that is the first step in being authentic is to get to know yourself. And it's a constant process. And sometimes you might think, I know who I am. But when you have other situations take place, for example, let's say the breakup of a relationship can be sort of shocking, but sometimes we may learn some things about ourselves that we didn't know. And so then it's time for an update. Aldrian, I see your comment, not to be too hard on myself when I don't meet a deadline, rather remain calm, reposition myself to do better the next time, and extend courtesy as well to all who support my position. Thank you. Yeah, it's, please, more.
Yeah, there's also another comment which says, I definitely have lots to think about as I never thought about several of the questions raised. I don't feel the need to introspect. So thanks for that comment. Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. So take some time for introspection. I find a really good way to do that is just go for a walk. I mean, it's wonderful if you can take some time to sit down on a cushion and meditate, but not all of us can do that. And so going for a walk can be a lovely way to just give ourselves a little bit of space. And Andrea, anything more to share?
Yes, Shernette is agreeing with you that walking is great. She also says authentic leadership must be a mixture of integrity, impartiality, giving, selfless love, empathy, peace, joy, and happiness.
Ooh,
Samantha says,
that's a tall order.
yes. Samantha says, I need to celebrate the small wins along the way instead of waiting to accomplish the big goal in totality.
Yes, so true. Wow, that's very good words of wisdom. Thank you, Samantha.
Right. Demisha has, for me, it's the heart, empathizing with people that are different from me. While I generally empathize and I'm caring towards most people, I need to empathize or be curious about those who are different from what is going on or what informs their way of thinking or behavior.
So true, so true. All right, would anyone else like to raise their hand and speak out? It's just so great to see you and hear from you. Thank you for sharing in this vulnerable way. I realize that you're taking some risks. Brian, let's hear from you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It was quite interesting in the discussion where members highly stated that they have been reminded of some of the beautiful qualities that they have and weren't aware that these are actually contributions to being very good, authentic leaders, right? Others also express in terms of some of these qualities that they possessed and were described, that in some circles, people would see these as weaknesses when they're actually good characteristic to provide good leadership to teams and groups. So it was quite interesting from that discussion where persons say they were reminded of the really good qualities that they possess just naturally that can be used as being characteristics of good leadership. There was also the discussion regarding where there might be some weaknesses where persons can develop in different areas that they might be a little bit weak in to provide leadership, not just in organization, but in religious activities, families, and other extended groups. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. One of the things I love about authentic leadership is when we practice it, it helps our home life as well as our work life. And, we are just one person in both places, but we sometimes feel like we have to play a role at work or play a role sometimes even at home. So, it helps with stress to not have to pretend. Suzette, would you share?
Good morning, everyone. From the exercise, I realized that I needed to do some more self-evaluation so that I can see what is affecting me and my leadership and what impacts the environment has on me so that I can change, so that I can be the authentic leader with the changes in the environment and also to satisfy me.
Thank you, Suzette. Yes, it's a funny thing because in a way, we have to become more resilient. We have to be more honest with ourselves. And then it's almost like when we can put ourselves in neutral, we can do a software update.
Yes,
who am I now? Who am I now? And that's really important to give yourself time for that.
Yes.
Time in nature or time by yourself. Okay, Lloyd. Oh, and then we'll hear more from Andrea. Lloyd, go ahead.
Hi, thanks a lot. I recognize, through the discussion that I am really people-centered. I tend to be very empathetic, but very conscious of the results that are required of me. Sometimes I feel conflicted because it requires a little firmer hand, and I'm often willing to apply without, of course, causing some sort of distress on the part of those that I lead. And oftentimes I struggle to find creative and effective ways of generating the response that is required. So it's a learning curve.
Very much so. And thank you for sharing that. Kind of when we're on our learning edge, that's when we're really being authentic leaders. So you don't have to have it all figured out, but just to be a learner is in itself the first step and a wonderful quality. Thank you for sharing that. Melissa.
So good morning again, everyone. I think what I learned about myself as it relates to this exercise was that I was able to relate to what Mrs. Prudence Jane Wilson said when she was speaking about Dr. Brown, as it relates to her, just questioning our abilities and asking herself, am I adequate? At times when she was at the helm, she felt afraid and, questioned what is it that she was doing and if she was able to lead her team. For me, being in a managerial position, at times,
Melissa, your voice is cutting out a little bit. We're not able to hear every word, but what you're saying is very important. Thank you.
I hope you're hearing me a bit better now.
A little bit.
Okay. All right. So I was saying, for me, this session has allowed me to really relate to what Mrs. Prudence Jane Thompson was saying about Dr. Brown. I too, at times, was wondering, am I adequate? Am I able to function in this leadership role? So I was able to, with that, I too was able to master some of those skills and those tools to better help me to be a more confident and a more transformational leader. So
beautiful.
So that really was how I was able to relate and what this exercise bring about in me. Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much, Melissa. Andrea.
Yes, in chat I have Marshall Lee saying, I realize that knowing where your energy comes from is important to topping up on the passion that drives every other area. Empathy to others and to yourself can go a far way in letting go of judgment, shame, and criticism.
Yes.
Denise says, good morning. I too am a rigid person and does not bend for anyone or anything. I believe I have a lot of changes to make.
Yeah.
And Sean is agreeing. And Justine says, I learned that I need along the way to take small steps and celebrate the small wins until I attain the big goals with the big victories. I think somebody has also shared this sentiment.
Yes, thank you. Very good. Those are words of wisdom. All right. Well, we're coming to the close of our session. And I'm going to just share one last thing with you. And that is that authentic leadership has lots of benefits for the organization, but it also has benefits for you. So what are some of the benefits if you practice authentic leadership? First of all, for yourself, you have a feeling of well-being, of satisfaction. You have more self-esteem and a sense of balance in your life. You also can have more trust. So let's say the first one is really about your relationship with yourself. And the second one is about your relationship with others, that you can, you can create more trust and connectedness and credibility with others. And then finally, and this one I think is very, very important.
Susan, you might want to put it on slideshow.
Oh, I see. Something is not, okay, one second. Sorry, you're not able to see the current slide? Okay, how's that?
It's better. Yes, thank you.
Better. Okay, very good. So let's go back to the first one. So our relationship with ourselves, we have well-being, more satisfaction about our life. We have more self-esteem and balance. And then in our relations with others, we generate trust, and we also feel more trust because we're being ourselves. When you're not being yourself, you have to remember all of the half-truths that you tell. And it can be very, very confusing and difficult to remember everything. So it's better to just be transparent and genuine. And then you have more connectedness and more credibility with others because they know they can trust you. And then finally, in terms of how you are in the world, you can have more power. Power comes, there are different types of power. One is personal power, and that's what I'm talking about here. It's our own fundamental self-confidence. We also have role power. That comes, it's bestowed on us based on our job description and or whatever our position is. And then we also have status power or societal power. But all of those things are impacted by our personal power and our authenticity, and that's what enables us to actually have ethics. Because when we're just trying to please others, we don't hold to our own ethical, moral values. But if we're too rigid, as some have said in the chat and also in the comments, that also can be a problem. So we've got to find that sweet spot somewhere in the middle where we're both being ourselves, but we're also open to other people being themselves. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for being with me in this session, and thank you on behalf of Mind that you have joined and are learning about leadership. And thank you for all of your contributions in the chat and for sharing yourselves in person. It's just such a delight to get to know you. And over to you, Georgia.
Thank you very much, Susan. We are now opening the floor to questions. We ask, however, that you put your questions in the chat. We'll give you a few minutes to do so.
Okay, Delia is asking if there are any books that you can recommend on this topic, Suzanne.
Oh, sure. Lots. I'll just put 2 in the chat. Bill George has written a number of books. One is just called Authentic Leadership, and the other one he wrote is called True North. And then there's another book called Why Should Anyone Be Led by You? I think that's a really good one about authentic leadership. And Georgia, you may want to type in more, but those are a few to get started with. Oh, there's also a book called Presence by Peter Skjei. That's a very good book. Thank you. You may not have that many questions. This session was really designed in order to help you ask questions of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I'm happy to try to respond to anything that anybody would like to ask.
And while you're formulating your questions, I've just posted a link, a SurveyMonkey link, in terms of just giving us some feedback on this session today. It's not going to take you more than 2 to 3 minutes. Really appreciate you just providing some feedback on that for us. And I'm just going to also ask you, I've posted a link again, in just one word, type in the chat how you felt about this session. One word that describes your experience, rather, in this session.
Because Seaford High School yesterday and got the some saying that
Audrey, asking you to mute. Okay, we have lots of them coming in fast and furious, re-energized, empowered, enlightening. Was a very good session, inspiring, insightful.
Interesting is there as well.
Refreshing, interesting, awareness, reflective, informative, thankful for the session, insightful, introspective. quite a number of the same words being echoed by several persons, such as reflective, introspective, interesting, and informative. Remember, as you type, please just click the SurveyMonkey link to give us your feedback. I've posted it again. And while you're doing that, I really just want to extend to Susan on behalf of the management and staff of the Management Institute for National Development, how grateful we are for this session today. I want to thank you personally. Susan has been one of our invaluable members of the team. I consider part of the MIND team. She has been doing work for us since 2017, and she's someone who you can call on at the last minute. Say, Susan, can you give me some feedback on it? Can you recommend, right? And when I approached her to do this session, she did not hesitate. And she embodies some of the very characteristics, of course, of being an authentic leader. Throughout it all, she has been very humble, caring, empathetic, and most importantly for me, she has been very collaborative. Susan, I want to thank you very much. It was a fantastic session. I personally felt energized again. Sometimes you go, your energy level gets sort of low, but when you're leading a unit called leadership development, you just have an awesome responsibility. And I'm so glad that you continue to be in my corner and in our corner as an agency, willing always to collaborate with us to ensure that the learning products and services that we provide to the government of Jamaica's public sector are of a high quality. This was a high quality session, and I want to thank you very much for that. You see the sentiments being echoed in the chat as well. And really, this is a high for me to end a Friday afternoon going into the weekend. So thank you very, very much for today. And we look forward to seeing how else we can collaborate as part of our leadership webinar series. Thank you very, very much, Susan.
Thank you so much, Georgia, and thanks to all of you for participating. It was lovely.
Okay, I've posted the evaluation link again. Please just spend about 2 minutes to give us some feedback, and we will keep the platform open for the next few minutes. Colleagues, this would not have been possible without you, the participants. And so we want to extend a heartfelt thanks and appreciation to you for continuing to support the MIND in creating a leadership culture that we want to see across the government of Jamaica's public sector. You continue to inspire us and push us beyond the limits in terms of ensuring that we design learning products, leadership learning products to meet your needs. So thank you very much for being here. And we look forward, we will have, stay tuned. We have in the Leadership Developments webinar series, a session coming up in January. There'll be one in February and there will be one in March. And I promise you, they will be just as fantastic as today's session. Okay, so stay tuned for those, for those sessions. Okay. So continue to have a great day, continue to be safe, walk good, and remember to complete that evaluation form. I've just posted the link again, as it may have gotten lost among all your messages. Thank you very much, colleagues, MIND staff, who have been instrumental in ensuring that this was yet another successful delivery in the leadership webinar series. Thank you very much.